Dominant versus submissive head, right? I think this is a good conversation and a good topic to really touch into. Now, I'll say this. Submissive head doesn't really take too much place below the 9 level of sexual attraction unless you just hit the right dominant streak and you push her up to the 9 level from the 8 level because your boldness arouses her. So dominant head would be like a woman who gets off on using those tricks, tactics, techniques to edge you, to tease you, to use, edging, teasing techniques. Typically, the 2-hand twist would be around the dominant head a lot of the times. Typically, a lot of the tongue swirling, slurping techniques, all these different things that she uses in order to replicate full throat action or to give you a pleasure that may make your body squirm, that may make you shake, you know what I mean? That may cause you to come quickly. That's what she may be trying to do. The things that she may do to try to arouse you or to turn you on with the sounds, a lot of the times those things are coming from a dominant place. Understand that the masculine submissive woman is a woman who gets off on giving pleasure. Not necessarily gets off, but is taking that as a certain source of validation, right? A certain source of power. She likes to exercise power through how she gives head, because she likes to see the pleasure that she can give you. That's more of a dominant head space with the dominant sexual ego, right? Now, with the dominant head, a woman's typically not going to like for you to grab her head. That's going to be a turnoff, because she wants to be in control. She doesn't want to be taught how to do it. Not really. No. She doesn't really want to be given instructions. She wants to take the knowledge that she's absorbed for herself and to stroke her own ego through the way that you are unable to control your pleasure and how she's in control of your pleasure, giving you forced orgasms, involuntary orgasms through how she gives you head. Right? So she may not want it to last too long unless she's going through an edging process. Also, most of the time, if a woman is giving you dominant head, she doesn't want the dick in her throat. She doesn't want that. She may still have a gag reflex, and she may be worried about being in a position where she may throw up because she's in a dominant headspace. So unless she integrates or she's had some wild experiences already, chances are she's not going to be too down for that. Now, submissive head comes from a standpoint of her just craving the dick in her mouth. She's so sexually attracted to you and aroused by you that she feels as if you're doing her a favor by putting the dick in her mouth. She wants permission to give you head, right? She wants permission to give you head, pretty much. Or she does it with permission. She just wants to jump and try to do it because she really wants it in there. You know, around the 9 level of sexual attraction, a woman takes pleasure out of doing things that would typically be seen as her giving pleasure. She starts to receive pleasure from those things, right? So around a 9 level of sexual attraction plus, a woman can get to the point where she can damn near have an orgasm from giving head. We have to understand the vagus nerve, right? We have to understand the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve extends from inside of the throat all the way down to the cervix, right? This is what can create cervical orgasms, or part of what can create orgasms near the back of the pussy, right? Cervical orgasms as well as throat gasms. Now, when a woman is on that 9 level of sexual attraction, giving you submissive head, she loves for you to grab her head and fuck her face, fuck her throat, to put it all the way in there, right? Now, from that place of you putting it all the way in there, that turns her on, that she is able to be stretched and to be receptive to all that your dominance can give. So you holding her head down while it's in there, or let's say you tell her, I've had moments like that before where a woman would be giving me head and I'd say, listen, when you put it in your throat, don't take it all the way out to take a breath. You take it out to the tip, lick on the head while it's in your mouth, but you make sure that you're still stroking it, because if I just put it in your throat for 5 seconds and then you take it out and you have to take a breath, I'm never going to get my nut. So I'd say don't do that. And then she would do that and I'd smack her. I had women hit me up, oh, I love that. Something about that, I just loved it when you forced me to do that. It was just, oh, it's amazing. It just did something to me. So that's submissive head. That happens around the 9th level of sexual attraction. Now, something to understand is this. If I personally believe in having some area within your sex life where you compartmentalize or have the capacity to compartmentalize your submissive sexual ego. Now, what does this mean? Compartmentalizing your submissive sexual ego is having areas where you can be dominant or top or whatever you want to call it overall, right? But there are also areas where the woman can receive some type of validation from the pleasure that she gives you. She can receive some power from how she gives you pleasure. So for me, when it comes to having vaginal intercourse, I'm going to be dominant. I'm going to be top 95% of the time. But when it comes to head, shit, it really depends on where the woman is with her energy. I'm probably going to be in a dominant sexual ego headspace maybe only 45% of the time when it comes to head. Maybe only 40% of the time. Because everyone has a dominant sexual ego and a submissive sexual ego. If you completely repress and suppress your dominant ego, then that's going to be something that's pushed into your shadow. If you are engaging sexually with someone outside of your primary partner and you have nowhere that you allow your submissive sexual ego to come out, then you put yourself in a stance where someone else can tap into that submissive sexual ego. And if that's not completely compartmentalized, and any other area within that dynamic starts to yield into you being in the submissive or in the feminine headspace, your sexual ego may be more attached to that individual than your primary partner, right? Now, what are the benefits of compartmentalizing your submissive sexual ego, right? Well, I believe in protecting your submissive sexual ego. If you compartmentalize it into a particular area, then you're able to divvy out that process. And also, a woman doesn't have to be in the 9th level of sexual attraction towards you at all times in order for you to get some type of pleasure or for you to have a sexual relationship with her. Right? If a woman is not that turned on that day or she's not aroused that day, she can still give you head. If she's compartmentalizes that as well, it's cool. But the issue is, if you compartmentalize the submissive sexual ego into head, it may be difficult for that woman to get to a space where she's anywhere near having orgasms from giving head, or where she's anywhere near, like, she may not be receptive to deep throating. Because a woman can't get attached to that idea of power in the submissive sexual ego. See, one thing that can happen is that things can get mixed up. Certain lines can get crossed, right? Right? If a woman is too much in her masculine energy and she's having a difficult time getting into her feminine submissive energy, right? Then dominant on dominant doesn't work too well, right? If you're in your dominant sexual ego and she's in her dominant sexual ego, then even if you're giving her some great dick, right? Some great dick, she could even be having orgasms. But someone who's in their dominant ego, they're getting turned on and they're receiving their validation, their feeling of power and pleasure from being the primary giver of pleasure, primary receiver of control. So a woman who's in the masculine submissive, all the time, she's not going to like sex that lasts too long, sex that's too spontaneous, sex anytime where her cup is low. But some women are masculine submissives and they compartmentalize sex itself into an area where they get into the feminine submissive, and typically that's what no limit soldiers do. So there may be a woman who doesn't want to be too emotionally invested or attached to you, but she still wants to have sex with you. She just wants to make sure she does that somewhat on her own time, or as a way of relieving stress and of releasing tension when she's had a long day. Now, that can happen around the 9 level of sexual attraction too, but that can happen around the 8 level. Right? Because the thing to understand is that a woman can be masculine submissive, have an 8 level of sexual attraction to you, see sex as an equivalent exchange where she desires to do it, but she's just going to want to do it somewhat on her own time when she's more available. On the 9 level of sexual attraction, a woman will make herself available. She's always available. If she's not available, she'll make herself available. A woman who has a 9 level of sexual attraction to you, she's never too sleepy, she's never too hungry, she's never too tired. You know, she's never had a day that was too bad to where she doesn't want to fuck, because dick will always make the day better. But I also want to break down dominant versus submissive head from the submissive sexual ego or the dominant sexual ego when it comes to giving head. So let's say we're talking about cunnilingus, right? Let's talk about cunnilingus, right? So if that woman wants to be in control of how she's giving head, right? If it's a facilitated orgasm, then it may be somewhat you're in the submissive ego with how you're giving her head. But if you are holding her arms down when she's having an orgasm, right? You are giving her head in a way where you're in control, you're teasing, you're edging, you're giving her, you're controlling her orgasms, you're saying don't come yet, right? And you're doing these different things. Then when she's receiving head, she's going to be in the submissive sexual ego, although you're the one who's giving her head. So I do think these are some interesting concepts to really go through, some interesting concepts to really think about, to understand, right? When it comes to the dominant versus submissive head, because many people look at head as something that's submissive to do. Like if you ever look up Dr. B.O.A. and he was saying, oh, alpha males, they don't give head. I'm like, that's weird. I don't believe that for 1 second, not for a single second. But I understand where he's coming from, because for me, I would place penetrating as something that's typically more dominant. I would say that when it comes to giving pleasure and versus receiving pleasure, that someone who is being penetrated has the opportunity of being stretched, that has a more so natural submissive aspect to it versus a more topical superficial pleasure level. Because like I'm primarily a dominant and primarily a top, all these different things. So when it comes to having sex, you do want a woman to primarily be in her submissive sexual ego having sex with you. She doesn't always have to be in her submissive sexual ego to give you head. And this is one thing that can work when you have somewhat mismatched sex drives, where a woman can give you head most of the time, and then you kind of wait for and seduce her to the point where she's highly aroused before you penetrate her, right? But you have to understand that most women are used to masturbating through their clitoris. So it's probably not a good sign if you're with a woman and she's only able to have orgasms from clitoral stimulation, but she's not able to have orgasms from penetration, right? Probably not the best sign. Not to say that you can't do anything about it. I've done something about it before, different occasions. You know, I'm a sex coach, so there's times where I've dealt with women who have never had vaginal orgasm for penetration. They're used to masturbating from the clitoris their entire life, and then I was able to give them vaginal orgasm for penetration. From, you know, involuntary orgasms, forced orgasms, orgasm control, teasing, edging, pleasure denial, delayed gratification. Right? But the thing to understand about the dominant versus the submissive sexual ego is that the dominant sexual ego gets turned off by not having its way, right? The dominant sexual ego, it gets turned off by not being in a position where a person is overcome by the pleasure that they receive and that they aren't giving up control in how they go about it, right? The submissive sexual ego is going to get more turned on by how much control it gives up. So oftentimes, let's say a dude is in his dominant sexual ego. He wants to please his woman, right? The woman, let's say a masculine submissive woman, she's not fully on the dominant side, although she has a dominant sexual ego. So for the masculine submissive woman, oftentimes, if she's having sex with a man and he's been fucking her for 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, it's going to make her feel insecure because the man is able to control the pleasure that he receives while engaging with her. So that can often turn into a situation where it's a stalemate, where neither person is having an orgasm, or the man will end up getting his first. He's going to be unhappy because the woman didn't have hers, and because it took so long, the woman is not going to be happy with the sex either, so it will kind of cancel out. Dominant sexual egos cancel out. That's why I say it's not about having an only role, but having a primary role. Not an only, but a primary. Right? You need to walk through your primary role first. And the reason why I think it's oftentimes best for the man to be in his dominant sexual ego for sex is because you need to be in your submissive sexual ego oftentimes to have orgasms from penetration. And I believe that this is something that extends for both men and women to a certain extent, because men also have a prostate. Now, when it comes to protecting your submissive sexual ego, you have to understand that unless you're a gay man or unless you're integrated with a woman, leave that shit alone. It doesn't benefit you to tap into that if you haven't already walked through your primary role long enough, right? Because once you've stepped into that lane, once you've had those types of experiences, you get to the point where that will oftentimes become your priority over the pleasure that you can receive from a more superficial topical place. So understand that the G-spot is homologous to the prostate, right? Prostate. G-spot, prostate, homologous. Most people are not primarily masturbating throughout their lives from an internal place. Most people are going to masturbate through something more superficial and topical. So yes, I know there's a clitoral body that the legs, they go behind the vulva. I know that it wraps around the first couple inches of the vagina, the clitoral body. But for the most part, a woman is going to masturbate through her clitoris. For the most part, a man is going to masturbate through his penis. And from that place, there's typically going to be something that feels a little bit more controlled. It's going to feel a little bit more safe. And it's not going to be something that is going to be such a feeling of pleasure that takes someone outside of their realm of understanding unless a person is extremely skilled. Right? Unless a person is really skilled, they understand teasing, edging, pleasure, denial, all those other different concepts that I was speaking of. Unless a person understands how to tap into those things, then typically that's going to be something that is kind of like a split amount of control, where it may be a voluntary or facilitated orgasm. It may be someone who's simply masturbating through that while they're engaging with sex, or like a man may be having sex with a woman and he's ejaculating, but is he really having an orgasm? Not really, because that man is masturbating with that woman's body, right? So a lot of women don't know that they don't give their man an orgasm, right? Because there's facilitated orgasms, there's involuntary forced orgasms, there is also just mutual masturbation. Right? So sometimes when two people have sex, it's just a matter of mutual masturbation, where the man is masturbating with the woman's body and the woman is, go DJ with their clitoris. Right? And these are just some things to understand. Now, like I do believe in protecting the submissive sexual ego, unless you're in a good enough dynamic to where that makes sense to do that. And I will say that when it comes to dominant versus submissive head, it's not that just because something is on the penis or the clitoris that it has to be a voluntary facilitated orgasm or mutual masturbation, but that if you're a man dealing with a woman, then it probably makes sense and is best for you to be in a position where you're able to tap her into certain levels of sexual attraction, sexual desire, and the submissive sexual ego so that she can receive orgasm and penetration. Because there is the non-stick principle. If she's never had that experience, then maybe the clitoris alone is good. Right? That's the best pleasure she's had so far, or at least the place where she receives the most pleasure from. So it's still a good experience, right? But these things do become subjective based off of what experience a person has. So if a woman is in a position where she's had vaginal orgasm penetration with another man, and then all you can give her is clitoral, then you kind of become the provision guy. It's probably going to be more so a matter of the emotional validation, social validation, financial investment that you offer her, rather than the feeling of being taken to a place she's never been sexually, right? Unless she's just never had a clitoral orgasm at all, which is a very rare woman if she's sexually in tune with her body at all. And then there's also just a matter of, how do I put that shit? That's one aspect of it. Right, that's one aspect of it. And also, if you are the emotional validation, social validation, financial investment guy who is giving the woman the validation that she feels is equivalent to feeling worthy of her body, right, as in you're earning sex with the woman, then if that's the role that you play, and then she comes across another guy who gives her vaginal orgasm penetration, she's probably not going to feel the same about you afterwards, because she's been taken further to her submissive sexual ego, meaning that she may have a lot of standards that she wants to hold you to about how you must treat her, right? And some of those things may just be about respect and all those other things. But for the man who's able to give her those orgasms from penetration, she's going to be more her submissive sexual ego, and that may permeate out into her submissive ego overall, where she may be in a position where she doesn't require damn nearly as much what she requires from you. And the fact that that man may be a little bit quote unquote toxic and stretch her and put her in her place is going to be something that she's going to be more receptive to versus you, which means that no matter what you do for her that may be beneficial or comforting or offering security, she's going to prefer her interactions with that man over you, because she's in her submissive sexual ego with him. And that's where a lot of the let that hurt go pussy and non-stick principle come from. So this is Dominant versus Submissive Head. This is Coach Brody. I'm out.